In the story of Mount Analog, the invisible mountain is presented as a place suitable only for the elect. It is run in some ways as a brutal regime. Those who cannot obtain the necessary money to sustain their livelihoods there are condemned to death. This is a real danger because a debt is incurred as soon as you arrive on the shores of the mountain's hidden island continent. As the narrator explains, the guide who received us had handed over to us, as an advance, a sack of metal tokens that serve as currency to exchange for goods and services. Each new group of arrivals receives this form of advance to cover initial expenses. This debt must be repaid, and so, says the narrator, many people do odd jobs to try to earn the money to pay it off. Much like illegal immigrants in the modern world, often become indentured to whoever aids them in the passage to their new home. But usually the narrator implies, this type of work doesn't yield enough money tokens to repay the debt. The only true means of repaying one's debt in full is in paradams, he says. When a member of his party asks the natives what would happen to them if they didn't succeed in repaying the debt, he was told, when you raise chickens, you give them grain, which they have to pay back in eggs once they become hens. When a pullet doesn't begin laying eggs at the proper age, what becomes of it? These words were taken rightly by the travelers in the story as a death threat. Perhaps this has something to do with Dommel not finishing the book, which ended abruptly right after his character's arrival on the island, called by the character Sogol, the path uniting earth and heaven. He had begun working on it in 1939, just after being told by a doctor that he would probably not live long because of having suffered through years of tuberculosis. The writing was interrupted for 3 years by the German occupation of France, which forced him and his wife to flee to various locations, suffering much. Dommel wrote 2 more chapters in 1943, but relapsed while working on it, leading to his death in 1944. He was working on it the very day that he died, at age 36. Sometimes I think certain truths are not yet publicly known because the people who would tell you about them are always killed before they can finish composing an intelligible explanation, which sometimes requires the form of fiction, poetry, music, or some other form of art. They are killed by those who would rather not have the hidden path to Eden revealed to the public, and I don't think the interested parties are limited to incarnated humans. Divine secrets simply cannot be revealed before you are struck by lightning from above. The idea of creating a secret invisible place on Earth for the elect to hide in shows up in Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. There, society's elite, led by a renegade genius engineer, decide to rebel against society's needy, useless masses and retreat into a hidden world of their own. It's an invisible realm they've named Atlantis, hidden inside the Rocky Mountains by some kind of force field invented by the society's founder, John Galt. This little modern-day Saturn, Lord of Misrule during the legendary Golden Age, populated his hidden kingdom of perfect anarchy with society's true elite. Galt selected them personally, and, one by one, presented them with an offer that, for some reason, none of them chose to refuse. The result is that each of them decides to walk out on his or her life, including all business and family obligations, so that they can disappear into Atlantis in the Rockies and live without rules or expectations in this land of perfect freedom. In so doing, most of them chose to commit some catastrophic act of sabotage against their own handiwork. Mines, factories, and railways are blown up with explosives, leaving heaping, burning piles of ruin, including a petroleum fire that nobody can put out because everybody smart enough to figure out how has already disappeared into Atlantis. The man who does this last act in particular leaves behind a sign stating, "I'm leaving it as I found it." This is all connected to the title, of course. It's a fuck you to humanity. The message is, we, the titans of industry who keep the sky from falling like Atlas, are going to shrug and let everything collapse on top of you. This is the shrug of whatever, embodied in the cremation of care ceremony at Bohemian Club meetings. The lake of fire imagery in the scene mentioned above, the burning pit that cannot be extinguished, is a clear channeling of the spirit of those trapped in Tartarus, enslaved and forced to hold up the pillars of heaven and earth, or Solomon's temple, as it's presented in the Testament of Solomon. The little snot who gets this all started, John Galt, invents a free energy machine, a mini particle accelerator harvesting atmospheric energy as it's described with unintentionally comedic sincerity in the film version. But then he realizes how much he hates humanity, and that they don't deserve to benefit from his invention. In fact, he decides to take it upon himself to teach society a lesson. So he runs away, vowing as he leaves to stop the engine of the world. He plans to do this by persuading all the other pillars of society like himself to following him to his hidden underworld of Atlantis. Inductees are all forced to spend the first night alone in a particular room in John Galt's house. Weird, right? They are made to take a vow never to live for another man, and to never ask another man to live for me. Actually, Rand commits the common mistake of writing that Atlas holds up the world rather than the heavens. But maybe this was done on purpose, considering the tradition in Solomonic magic that the world's foundations are being held up by demons enslaved in the underworld. After all, Rand's real name was Alice Rosebaum, but she chose to name herself something remarkably close to the Hebrew ayin, I, and ein, nothing, sometimes transliterated as ayin, and even, when from Arabic, as ein. Biologically Jewish and raised in an allegedly non-observant Jewish household, she probably would have at least been aware of the dictionary meaning of her chosen pen name, if not also the esoteric expansion of that meaning. The I and the zero are two Kabbalistically significant and related concepts. As Aleister Crowley wrote in the footnotes to the Book of Lies, in Hindu philosophy, it is said that Shiva, the destroyer, is asleep, and that when he opens his eye, the universe is destroyed, another synonym, therefore, for the accomplishment of the great work. But the eye of Shiva is also his lingam, his penis. Shiva is himself the Mahalingam, which united these symbolisms. The opening of the eye, the ejaculation of the lingam, the destruction of the universe, the accomplishment of the great work. All these are different ways of saying the same thing. I'm not quite sure if this line is in her book or not, but in the film version, the main character Dagny actually calls the man who sabotaged her number 93 railroad line by the same title as Shiva. "You destroyed my line," she says. "You're the destroyer." Though she never professed to have interest in anything mystical, quite the opposite, and Aleister Crowley never mentioned her by name. The two were contemporaries, and there are numerous thematic similarities between the writings of both people. Satanic church founder Anton LaVey was an open admirer of hers and described his invented religion as Ayn Rand with trappings. Whether or not she was a practicing Satanist, she was definitely channeling occult, and specifically Thelemic, Crowleyan, themes in her work, as evidenced by her choice of the number 93 for the railway line that figures in a pivotal scene in the novel. I certainly wouldn't put it past the woman to choose a Kabbalistically significant pen name for herself, or to embed such themes in her stories. As a relevant aside, also note that there are projects at the CERN Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland named Atlas and Alice. These names were chosen because the quantum physics projects taking place there are about discovering the foundations of the universe, like Atlas, probing the hidden depths of matter, like Alice down the rabbit hole, and creating portals to parallel universes, like Alice through the looking glass. This is disturbing to some observers because CERN has been the target of numerous internet conspiracy allegations claiming that its experiments are intended to open up a portal to hell and/or to destroy the entire world/universe. All for the love of Satan, of course. One of the pieces of evidence for this is that they have a statue of Shiva the Destroyer on the grounds of their campus. The scientists at CERN are also accused by conspiracy theorists of affecting reality in subtle ways, creating changes in the group consensus of historical memory, a phenomenon known as the Mandela effect, similar to what's done to the human victim population in the plot of the film Dark City described earlier. I immediately thought of this when watching the beginning of the third Atlas Shrugged film, which continues the cliffhanger scene that ended the second movie. The Mandela effect came to mind because in the middle of the scene, which they replay from its start, after the lead character Dagny crashes through the invisible barrier covering Atlantis, the woman playing her role is abruptly switched out for another actress. Wikipedia says that this was done because budgetary constraints prevented the producers from continuing with the same actress. Whatever the reason, the effect is jarring. After the woman's plane goes through the portal into what is essentially an artificial alternate dimension, Her physical appearance changes completely, yet nobody else in the scene seems aware that anything is different, just like the people in Dark City don't notice the world around them being changed constantly. In fact, as he helped her out of the rubble of her airplane, John Galt described her as though she were a fallen angel, saying, "Dagny, for a woman that just fell out of the sky, you look pretty damn good." As I watched all 3 installments of the film version of Ayn Rand's novel, I couldn't help but wonder if the hidden realm of Atlantis already exists. If she was either prophesying the future, or even issuing an invitation to the elite, kind of like the old Rosicrucian manifestos were meant to. I mean, what if David Bowie and Prince were really taken to Atlantis to perform for the real, unknown 1% in their invisible paradise? For years, we have been told that the elite are cashing in their accounts and retreating to private islands, tax havens, underground bunkers, and the like, preparing for the collapse of post-industrial capitalist society. How far back in history does this trend go? We know that most large office buildings in big cities are predominantly empty. There are tax incentives for owners to sit on them rather than sell them. Sometimes it's even more profitable to allow a building to be destroyed somehow and take the insurance money. All of the heroes in Ayn Rand's stories are into destroying their own buildings and factories, a theme that also appears in her earlier novel, The Fountainhead. In that story, a genius architect dynamites an apartment building for low-income families that he was hired to design, because the owners ended up having the builders change something about his blueprint. When the Grenfell Tower, a low-rent high-rise, went up in flames in London in June 2017, I must admit that I thought about Rand's characters. I found myself wondering if the elite really are into destroying buildings as some sort of revenge against the poor masses whom they despise. I recalled that in 120 Days of Sodom, the Marquis de Sade described men whose sexual fetish of choice involved renting out properties to single mothers, with faults intentionally built into the design so that shortly after they took residence, the roofs would collapse on the women and children, giving pleasure to the cruel landlord who had set the whole thing up in the first place. Nowadays, in addition to the joy of committing murder and inflicting pain, the perpetrator would probably also be rewarded with a nice insurance settlement. So in August 2016, when I rewatched the Fountainhead movie from 1949 with Gary Cooper and Patricia Neal, which I had seen before years ago, and finally forced myself to struggle through the Atlas Shrugged film series, I noticed this running theme involving the wanton destruction of one's own work and property to punish the masses for their ignorance. I couldn't help thinking about 9/11. Was Larry Silverstein going Galt when he made the decision to pull it on Building 7 that day? Of course, there is so much symbolism to be seen in the events of that historic day, and a lot of it ties in with the motifs I've been talking about in this essay. Several people have commented before on some of the things I will now point out. I recommend William Ramsey's book Prophet of Evil, Aleister Crowley, 9/11 and the New World Order, where he gets into the potential esoteric meaning of some of the numbers involved. To start with, let us note that the 3 buildings which collapsed could be seen to represent the 3 pillars in the Masonic tracing board picture and the 3 pillars of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. Note also that the one called Building 7 allegedly fell without being hit by a plane, like the others supposedly were, because its, quote, foundations were undermined. This seems related to the idea of undermining the foundation underneath the pillars that hold up the sky. Building 7 could even be seen as symbolic of the 7 stars of the Pleiades, for remember that one of the tie is supposedly invisible. The 6 visible ones have always been used for navigation. They were symbolized as doves, and doves appear in many mythic tales around the world to guide mariner heroes through rough waters in times of trouble. Even Noah was guided by a dove when adrift in the waters of chaos, as the dove helped him determine when a solid foundation of dry land had appeared for him to anchor his ark on. There is a meaning hidden here in the motif patterns. One of the early names for the Americas was Columbia, from the Latin word for dove, columba, which is also related to the word column. The association between doves and navigation is most likely the reason why Christopher Columbus chose his alias thusly. But also, using the name Christopher, meaning the Christ carrier, which he signed with an X for Christ standing in for the first syllable, indicates that part of his job was to lead like a dove and bring Christianity across the waters, just like his namesake St. Christopher brought the baby Jesus across the raging river in the famous fable. But in that tale, it was only because St. Christopher was a giant that he was able to bear the burden of Christ, which included the weight of all the world's sins. Again, the theme of Atlas and of a chosen human column or pillar to bear a divine weight comes up. The next notable fact is that it was, quote, Flight 93 inches that allegedly went down in Pennsylvania. Coincidentally, Pennsylvania is called the Keystone State, with a royal arch keystone and all-seeing eye as its official state seal. In Atlas Shrugged, it is the 93 railway line that is sacrificed by terrorists radicalized by John Galt, with a catastrophic effect on the country. It was also the 93rd floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center that American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into that day. This could be connected to Aleister Crowley's Current 93. This is a magical line of energy that, he claimed, would define the current aeon, when the rule of thelema, Greek for individual will, with a numerical gematria value of 93, would become the only law of the land, a very Randian idea. 11 was the number that Crowley associated with what he considered the most potent form of ceremonial magic, involving adult male sodomy on a male child. Rituals, he wrote, and other secret documents from his two magical fraternities, the OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, Order of the Templars of the East, and the AA, Astron Argentum Silver Star, make clear the purposes of these perverted sex rites. These are nothing less than to collapse the pillars that hold up heaven, murder God himself, destroy the created universe, and escape to a new world where they, the chosen few, are the new gods in charge. This is all related to the idea that Dath, or knowledge, forms a hidden 11th Sephiroth on the Kabbalistic tree of life, as part of the middle pillar, the invisible or sleeping pillar of beauty, near the top, between Bina, understanding, and Chokmah, wisdom. But Dath is not really there, the Kabbalists say, as knowledge is an illusion, which is the reason why its fruit was forbidden to humans in Eden. This is also why Dath can therefore act as a portal to the Kulipoth, the dark side of existence, also known as the Tree of Knowledge, or Tree of Death. For on the day that you eat of it, you will surely die. Dath is the only Sephiroth on the Tree of Life that is shown sitting on the dividing line of the Tehom, the Abyss, that separates the divine trinity of the top 3 Sephiroth from the 7 lower realms. It sits evenly on the fence, half in and half out, dangling 1 foot over the precipice, like the Fool in the traditional tarot. The seeker of hidden knowledge of the highest realms has no idea what he's walking into. If the Tree of Life were a geographical map, and you were walking down the Pillar of Beauty from Malkuth, the kingdom, towards Kether, the crown, like you were walking down the street to the town square, you might think it makes sense to go straight through Dath, which would be right in front of Kether. Knowledge, it might seem, is a direct avenue to an experience of the highest realm of divinity. To you it looks real. Like a painting of a road going through a tunnel looks real to the coyote when the roadrunner holds it up in front of his path. But then you would probably have a rude awakening as you broke through and plunged down into the abyss below. The planetary attribution given to Dath in modern systems is usually Uranus, Lord of the Sky. But the attribution given to Kether is Pluto, the Roman name for Hades, Lord of the Underworld. Therein lies an interdimensional mystery. If your guru tells you that you've successfully crossed the abyss and landed safely in Kether, the truth is that you're actually in hell, and that's the divine state that you've been greedily seeking after all along. Crossing the abyss is the name of the initiation rite that one must go through in order to graduate from the 11th degree of the OTO to the AA, a higher order. This rite involves being kidnapped and held prisoner while all of the other members have carnal knowledge of your anus. This causes your soul to be snatched from your body, although they tell you it's just your ego or mundane personality dying and lost in the abyss, while your physical temple becomes inhabited by one of the many spirits trapped in the abyss that are eager to escape into our world. IV. This is how the 11 gate, the portal of Dath and Uranus, leads you into the realm of darkness on the other side. This is the same bait and switch, the fake gate of heaven that leads to hell, which many people envisioned happening to the hijackers on 9/11. We were all told that their motivation to commit mass murder and suicide was because the hijackers believed that this would get them into paradise. But that was back when most of us believed that there were hijackers and planes involved. The fact that on 9/11 a pair of seemingly immaterial planes hit two column-like buildings, causing them both to collapse and a third to collapse in sympathy from having its foundation undermined, is perhaps a hint about another impending collapse in our world involving things from an immaterial plane of existence sundering the pillars that keep the different planes separated. By using the words seemingly immaterial to describe the planes used as weapons on 9/11, I am referring to the fact that if you watch the footage of the second plane impact closely, you'll see the aircraft fade in and out of existence rapidly as it shoots towards the building, and then immediately dissolve upon impact. The planes that were said to have crashed in Washington, D.C. and in the field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, likewise completely dissolved, leaving no wreckage. It was almost as if those planes crashed through invisible force fields concealing entrances to Ayn Rand's Atlantis, like Dagny's plane does in the fictional story. The thought gives me chills and reminds me of the film Millennium with Chris Christopherson, in which entire plane loads of people are kidnapped by time travelers and taken to repopulate a dying future Earth, while their families at home are left to think that they died in a crash. Airplanes flying through interdimensional portals and time portals have been the subject of fiction many times, in the Twilight Zone and elsewhere. It's an obvious idea to have, considering that the Bible talks about the sky containing windows to the upper heavens, and there are numerous myths from around the world about kingdoms in the clouds. If nothing else, I'm sure you're familiar with the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, for instance. Recall how huge the hole beneath Ground Zero inches in New York was after the attack, how big the dust cloud was, how noxious the fumes, how long the fires burned, and how long it took for developers to build over the hole. Recall how surreal it was when the buildings disintegrated. People still argue about whether jet fuel could cause a fire to burn hot enough to melt all of that steel. Is it not possible that those towers collapsed not just into their own footprints, but into something much hotter and deeper? Another text written by Aleister Crowley expresses the real sentiments and motivations of the real architects of that ritual, which was indeed about breaking open the gates of both heaven and hell. It's titled Liber 77, also known as Liber OZ. There's that over the rainbow connection again. It's all just requoting his other book, Liber Alvel Legis, the Book of the Law, which he channeled from a being called N.E.W.S, whom he also called OIVZ, another word with a gematria value of 93. The message is that they, the Thelemites, proclaim their right to do whatever they want, but it also extols slavery for others. It says, "The law of the strong. This is our law, and the joy of the world." AL 2:21. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. AL I-40. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay. AL I-42-3. Every man and every woman is a star. AL I-3. There is no God but man. Man has the right to live by his own law, to live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. Man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch, mold, build as he will, to dress as he will. Man has the right to love as he will. Take your fill and will of love as ye will, when, where, and with whom ye will. AL I-51. AL Man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights. The slaves shall serve. 2:58. Love is the law, love under will. AL I-57. The meaning of this last line, which is the motto of Crowley's entire magical system, is made more clear after reading his Equinox of the Gods ritual, in which Jesus is replaced as the chief of the divine council by Horus, said to represent the new eon. Jesus, through his sacrifice, broke the curse of the law, as it says in the Bible, replacing the law of Moses with the law of love, and replacing Jehovah to become King of Kings. Therefore, at the time of the original writing, love is the law, if you understand the meaning of the word is. However, in the new eon, which he said was coming and perhaps is upon us already, Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, which is the law of Thelema, or will. Therefore love is to be placed under will, and subdued to the new law of doing whatever you can get away with, which Crowley also called the law of the strong. Others who are not as strong are to be the slaves. So was 9/11 the opening of a portal to another dimension where the elite are now living it up without us, letting the slaves serve for them down below while we remain ignorant of the giants, castle in the clouds, filled with magical treasures we can't even imagine. In Atlas Shrugged, because Atlantis was run on Galt's-free energy machines and without regulations, they instantly developed all sorts of amazing Star Trek-type technologies that were unthinkable to people on the outside. A similar plot device involving the elite creating a hidden society for themselves, run with technology that they don't think the masses are ready for yet, shows up in Disney's Tomorrowland franchise. Apparently, in addition to the areas with this name found at Disneyland and Disney World, there are a couple of Disney films with this title, one old and one more modern. The idea is that Tomorrowland is a secret realm accessible through a hidden entrance in one of the rides at Disneyland. In the story, Tomorrowland is run by a secret society called Plus Ultra, the old motto about the new world beyond the Pillars of Hercules. The symbolic implications of this should be obvious to you by now. The members of Disney's imaginary Plus Ultra group have included, quite improbably, both Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. The video below, put out by Disney, even suggests that children at Disneyland are abducted and taken to the hidden realm of Tomorrowland surreptitiously. The secret entrance opens up automatically for kids who have been pre-selected by undercover agents and marked with a special lapel pin. I think this detail about Plus Ultra's special lapel pin for their chosen child victims may be a reference to a real elite secret society at Disneyland that does actually issue lapel pins to its members, and that's Club 33. You can read all about it on numerous other websites. Ostensibly it's innocuous, but the number they chose implies a connection to the highest level of Freemasonry, the 33rd degree, which does not officially even exist. It's also the number of sections on the Earth map in the UN logo, and the number of facets on the crown of a round, brilliant-cut diamond. Returning to the subject of esoteric notions regarding slavery, the topic was alluded to in code during the Mithras and Uranus seance, although we did not pick up on it at the time. Just before the name of Gint was mentioned, Mithras spelled out OGFI. I took it for nonsense at the time, but then I decided to look up both words together and found the following reference to a man named James Ogilvie during the French Revolution. It's from The History of Slavery, Ancient and Modern by W.O. Blake, 1860. A young mulatto named James Ogilvie was then residing in Paris, whither he had been sent by his mother, a woman of color, the proprietrix of a plantation in Saint Domingo. Auge had formed the acquaintance of the Abbé Grégoire, Brissot, Robespierre, Lafayette, and other leading revolutionists connected with the society of the N.E.W.S, and fired by the ideas which he derived from them, he resolved to return to Saint Domingo and, rousing the spirit of insurrection, become the deliverer of his enslaved race. Accordingly, paying a visit to America first, he landed in his native island on the 12th of October, 1190, and announced himself as the redresser of all wrongs. Matters, however, were not yet ripe for an insurrection, and after committing some outrages with a force of 200 mulattoes, which was all he was able to raise, Ogilvie was defeated and obliged, with one or two associates, to take refuge in the Spanish part of the island. M. Blanchelon, succeeding M. Peigné as Governor-General of the colony, demanded Ogilvie from the Spaniards, and in March 1191 the wretched young man was broken alive upon the wheel. The court convicted Vincent Ogilvie and Jean-Baptiste Chauvin, his associate, of the intent to cause an insurrection of the people of color, and it condemned them to be conducted by the public executioner to the church of Cape Francois, and there, bareheaded and en chemise with a rope about their necks, upon their knees and holding in their hands a wax candle of 2 pounds weight, to declare that they had wickedly, rashly, and by evil instigation committed the crimes of which they had been accused and convicted, and then and there they repented of them, and asked forgiveness of God, of the king, and the violated justice of the realm, that they should then be conducted to the place d'armes of the said town, and in the place opposite to that appropriated to the execution of white men, to have their arms, legs, hips, and thighs broken alive, that they should be placed upon a wheel, with their faces towards heaven, and there remain so long as God should preserve their lives. After their death, their heads were to be severed from their bodies, and placed upon poles, that of Auge on the road to Dondon, and that of Chavannes on the road to Grande Rivière, and the property of both to be confiscated to the king. Chavannes died as he had lived, the stern, unyielding enemy of the whites. But Auge in that terrible moment lost all his firmness. He implored the pity of his judges, and offered to reveal important secrets if they would spare his life. 24 hours were granted him, and he revealed the existence of a wide-laid conspiracy among the mulattoes and Negroes of the island. But as not much importance was attached to his communications, he was ordered to punishment. 21 of his associates, among whom was his brother, were condemned to be hung, and 13 others were sent to the galleys for life. The rest were pardoned. Although the insurrection of Auge was ill-timed and rash, and his death that of the most degraded criminal, his name and sufferings have ever been hallowed in the memory of his race, and the martyrdom of Ogfie was ever afterwards the rallying signal to encourage and unite the mulattoes in deadly hostility against the whites. By this barbarous massacre, the breach between these two races was made irreconcilable and eternal. Later in the document there is this mention of the Treaty of Ghent of 1814 in regards to the slave trade. In afterwards remarking upon this communication, Lord Palmerston desired the commissioners to observe to Mr. Trist that the two governments having, by the 10th article of the Treaty of Ghent, mutually engaged to each other that they would use their utmost endeavors to promote the entire abolition of the slave trade, it seems to be perfectly consistent with the respect which the agents of each country must feel for the other country, that they should not only themselves act in strict accordance with the spirit of the engagement which their own government has contracted, but that they should furnish to the agents of the other government any information which may be calculated to enable that other government more effectually to accomplish the common purpose. Mr. Trist also alluded, in his letter, to the manufacture of goods in Great Britain expressly designed for the African trade. Lord Palmerston directed the commissioners to state to that gentleman that, if he can at any time furnish Her Majesty's government, through them, with any information which may directly or indirectly enable the government to enforce the penalties of the law against British subjects who may be concerned in the slave trade, Her Majesty's government will feel most sincerely obliged to him. For what reason did Mithras decide to refer to this person, James Ogfie, and, by implication, to the Treaty of Ghent? The source I have quoted above was the only one I could find on this subject. What happened to Ogfie is a very obscure detail of history. So what is the meaning? First, let us note that M. Ogfie was executed in the place opposite to that appropriated to the execution of white men. Here we have the presentation of the criminal black slave as a polar opposite of a white criminal. The implication is that there is a moral and cosmic polarity here as well. Black, evil; white equals good. This might be considered a presage of the racial violence that was perhaps predestined to take place around the time of the eclipse, when the light was obscured by the darkness along a solar path that cut through the center of the country diagonally, just as the dark spot on the sun appeared, to the observer, to enter from the top corner of the yellow disk, and to exit from the bottom corner. Then let us consider the way in which Ogfie and the others convicted with him were displayed while they waited to die. All of their limbs were broken, and they were placed up a wheel, with their faces towards heaven. If this were the case, would they not be in a similar position as the Zodiac Man, bent backwards around the universe? Also, their faces and hands would be in the same position as in the Golden Dawn's sign of Theoricus. But then let's look again at Dali's Corpus Hypercubus. You may not notice it at first, but there's a cube poking Jesus right in the back. Look at this photo of Dali holding a hypercube unfolded as a cross for comparison. Then look at the painting again. Jesus is bent backwards over that middle cube, just like the Zodiac Man and like Ogfie. If the whole cross were to be folded back into a hypercube again, with Jesus still on the outside, then his arms and legs would be bent backwards over it. In the Gospels, they describe the legs of Jesus being broken as he hung on the cross. In fact, it's said to have been an act of mercy, allowing him to finally die. In the case of Ogfie, It specified that the limbs were broken while he was alive. But I think that maybe part of the point of Mithras referencing this event was to make a note of these similarities. In other words, Jesus was punished as a slave would be, and for the same crime, inciting a slave rebellion. This is because, as many Christian Gnostics believed, Jesus was sent into this world to alert us to the fact that we have been enslaved and imprisoned. We are being pacified with hallucinations and oblivious to our true state, as we are being drained systematically of our energies by an unseen group of entities, the archons who put us here, and forced to bear the burden of upholding their existence. Each fallen eon is forced to play the role of the cornerstone, or the pillar, like Atlas, providing the foundation for the one that comes after it. The idea of the sacrifice on the cross is that Jesus stepped into that role for us, allowing us to escape bondage. The open arms signify the position of Atlas and Shu. The broken legs symbolize the position of kneeling or genuflection that the slave put in this position adopts in order to bear the burden, and also to show submission to the master. Perhaps our hidden position of slavery is one of the reasons why the case of James Ogilvy was referenced by Mithras in the Seance, as well as the city of Ghent, where an international treaty laying the groundwork for the end of the international slave trade was signed. However, the old Flemish word for the area, the meaning and origin of which is unclear, is Ganda. To me, this might possibly be a reference to Cain, who, as I mentioned before, was thought by Orientalist L.A. Waddell to be a god-king of the ancient world. In Genesis, Cain is said to be the builder of the first city, named Enoch, in a netherworld called Nod, although whether it was a netherworld at the time or only became one later is unclear. As Waddell wrote in the British Edda, amongst these titles for him in the Edda is Gun, or Kon, corresponding to his Sumerian title of Gun, Gin, or Gan, which thus disclosed as the source of the Hebrew Cain, is also seen to be the source of Gawain of the Arthur legend, and akin to his Egyptian title of Khonsu. His more common titles in the Edda, as we shall see, are Aegeus, the Azag of the Sumerians, Bauj, the Bakus of Sumerians or Bacchus, and especially applied to him in Babylonian records as King or Eric or Enoch, the city founded by Cain, and Magor Meok, i.e., Michael, his Muku or Mukla title, in Sumerian. Can Cain's city be thought of as a dark counterpart to the shimmering holy city of New Jerusalem? Is it, like the New Jerusalem, shaped like a cube, and like the ark constructed by the Noah-like hero to survive the flood in the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, or Bilgamesh, as the Sumerians would have pronounced it? That would make it the black cube of Saturn, the sunken city of Kronos, king of the golden age of the Titan gods, now imprisoned in Tartarus. As if in acknowledgement of this idea of an infernal inverse reflection of everything in the netherworld, the word Nod contains the same consonants as Eden, but in the reverse order. This is significant since, purportedly, the original Old Testament was written in a Hebrew alphabet that did not contain any vowels. In other words, all of the vowels seen in subsequent translations were put there by interpretation. The original garden paradise was called, in Hebrew, D-N, and the original banishing place of the fallen villain Cain was N.D. Yet another amazing discovery was made a few days ago when I was reading about John Dee while pondering these subjects. It was in a book about Dee that I've had sitting on my shelf for over 15 years, in a part that I had highlighted the first time I read it, way back then. It says that the Archangel Uriel told Dee during a divination session to make a sigil representing himself, utilizing the delta, the Greek letter for his name. This symbol looks like a simple triangle. In the same session, another spirit, King Karmara, also told to him to make this into a layman to wear during future sessions, comprehending the form of thy own name, which is to be made in perfect gold. Then another, King Bobogul, chimed in and added, I have said D at length, but not too late. A bit later, King Karmara also added some more. While holding up a measuring rod, he pointed to the end of it, then to the middle of it, and said, I bear a power and a virtue that is beyond measure. Nothing is obscure which is received through him. One thing is yet wanting. A meet receptacle. There is yet wanting a stone. One there is most excellent. Hid in the secret part of the depths in the uttermost part of the Roman possession. Lo, the right hand of God is upon thee. Thou shalt prevail with it, with kings, and with all creatures of the world, whose beauty, in virtue, shall be more worth than the kingdoms of the earth. Go towards it, and take it up. Keep it secret. Let no mortal man touch it but thine own. I assume the uttermost part of the Roman possession refers to Britain. Perhaps he was talking about the London stone, which Dee was reportedly quite interested in. Supposedly, he lived for a time near Bucklersbury, where I set the ritual scenes for genuflect, because that's where the London stone, which I also included in my story, has traditionally always sat. Thinking about this, something else occurred to me. When King Bobogle said DDD, he was clearly referring to some meaning encoded within both the phonetic syllable and the first initial of Dee's last name, particularly when written in the form of a delta or triangle. In Anthropogenesis, Helena Blavatsky called the delta the, quote, vehicle of the unknown deity. She went on, a good proof of it lies with the name of the deity beginning with delta. Zeus was written by the Boeotians, asterisk, thence the deus of the Latins. In Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike wrote about the holy virtues of 3 triangles specifically. The triple triangle is peculiarly sacred, having been among all nations a symbol of the deity. Prolonging all the external lines of the hexagon, which also it includes, we have 6 smaller triangles whose bases cut each other in the central point of the tetractys, itself always the symbol of the generative power of the universe. Thus, too, we form 12 still smaller triangles, 3 times 3 of which compose the tetractys itself. The hexagon itself faintly images to us a cube, not visible at first glance, and therefore the fit emblem of that faith in things invisible. Considering all of the foregoing, I couldn't help but think about the cryptic message that Jean Cocteau encoded into his aforementioned mural of the crucifixion at the Notre Dame de Paris in London. Right above his signature, he had written the initials DDD, along with an 8-rayed asterisk. This was the reason I had highlighted the words DDD when I found them in the book about John Dee. I wondered if Cocteau might have been referring to that somehow, so I decided to look up the term DDD on the internet. That's when I found the most interesting things. First, I found a website about the game and TV show Yu-Gi-Oh! Note that the game contains the same syllables as Ouija and Agio. In the context of the show and game, the letters stand for Different Dimension Demon. Here's what the Yu-Gi-Oh! Wikia site says about it. Known as DDD in English manga and pronounced Triple D in the dubbed anime, this is a sub-archetype of the DD archetype used by Declan Akaba in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5 anime and special manga chapter. The DDT monsters serve as the bosses of the DT archetype due to most of the archetype's gameplay focusing on their summoning, along with the fact that DTDD monsters generally have higher ATK and DEF, and stronger effects than non-DDDD monsters. D/DD monsters are named after either a historical person, usually a military leader, or some form of the end of the world, e.g. Armageddon, and they encompass all of the extra deck summon monsters, except Link monsters, as well as some main deck effect monsters. Most of them have an attributed office role from a pun on their name, creating a demonic hierarchy-themed archetype. According to Declan Akaba, DDD is short for Different Dimension Demon, Differento Dimension Demon. This refers to how the DDD monsters consists of monsters of all extra deck summoning methods, with each extra deck summoning method, fusion, synchro, and XYZ, originating from a different dimension in the anime. This may all seem like needless detail for me to repeat, but check out the next piece of the puzzle. The next thing you get when you look up DDD is a song by the Japanese pop singer Kota Kumi that came out on December 21, 2005. That's about 6 months after I visited London with my husband Brian and ran across the Temple of Mithras that became the subject of my novel Genuflect. I also visited the Cocteau mural at the Notre Dame de France during that same trip and took pictures there. Now here's where it gets totally freaky. According to the artist herself, DDD stands for Triple Diamond. When you watch the music video for the song, you see the crowns of 3 round brilliant diamonds projecting from the ceiling above the performers, acting as deck prisms, just like the diamond keystone in Genuflect. The gems are colored pink, yellow, and blue. They are taking the place of spotlights, as the lyrics of the song clearly state. Can it get any more directly tied in with my research, my channeled messages, and the ostensibly fictional inventions I created for my novel? What's more, the room that they are performing in for this music video appears to be an underground dungeon, where effeminate, drugged-looking young men in leather S&M outfits are reaching out desperately through the bars of iron prison stalls that line the walls. Others are being whipped. One is crucified on an X like St. Andrew, or like somebody doing the sign of Moulier, and he truly looks like he's suffering. The whole video looks like a scene from the pit of hell. At one point, the people on screen reach up towards the ceiling with flames dancing on their fingers. This is amazing, of course, because of the connection to the imprisonment of Cain/Saturn and the other titans underground, an opening to which I suspect is right there in London, beneath Michael Bloomberg's Temple of Mithras, as I indicated in Genuflect. The lyrics are half in Japanese and half in English, so some of the meaning is lost on me. However, what I can read fits right in with everything I've said here. There can be no doubt that the song is a reference to something in Britain. Wikipedia states that, for the cover sleeve of DDD, Kumi chose to represent the United Kingdom and its symbolism of Britannia. The cover features the artist in a leather dominatrix outfit with a feathered headdress somewhat resembling the helmet of a Roman centurion. This is Britannia. Figures wearing the same Roman helmet are seen in Cocteau's mural at Notre Dame de France and worn by the goddess Diana, played by Brigitte Bardot, in Cocteau's film Testament of Orpheus. Such a helmet also features as a Mithraic ritual item in Genuflect, as it was the badge of the Mithraic grade of Miles, the soldier, in the ancient Mithraic cult. In Genuflect, I actually mention the figure of Britannia, the female incarnation of the spirit of Britain, and also Britomart, the Celtic goddess after whom Britain is named. In fact, 2 of the characters in my story indulge in singing the patriotic song Rule Britannia in one of the scenes. But even more amazingly, a treasonous and subversive rendition of this song was performed by the punk rock star Amyl Nitrate in the Derek Jarman film Jubilee, in which she wears the headdress. The film is set in a post-apocalyptic future, but, incredibly, opens with a scene of the Archangel Uriel appearing before John Dee and Queen Elizabeth I to give them a vision of how the British Empire will end. Perhaps significantly, Adam Ant is an actor in this film as well, and his stage name comes from adamant, meaning hard, unbreakable, the etymological root of the word diamond. I honestly think that the song D.D.D. by Kodakumi was somehow, in a cosmic way, inspired to be created so that I would find it years later and use it as a clue to decode the message in the Cocteau mural. I doubt if the artist herself is aware of this. The black sun in the mural in London is implied by the black mirror on the wall behind the crucified man in the DDD video. The fact that Britain is referenced on the cover of the album is a clue to look there for the meaning of the song. Let us now examine the lyrics, bit by bit. Turn it, turn it, turn it up, X4. Hey Minna, how are ya doing? Having a showtime, whoa, listen up baby. This time wa tokubetsu. Tabunto katilde kamoshire nai nante kibunya nakude 3 minds are right. Count shidashitara tomara nai 3 mix atsukute cool na crazy shit. Daremo mitakoto no nai showtime. Many times I told you, but I say it again. I told you, I'm gonna do the best I can. I know what I got to do to make my dream come true. I think that these words were inspired by spirits, and a message specifically to me. They are trying to get me to understand a certain message, so that I can help them make their dreams come true, escape from Tartarus. Because I don't yet understand the message, they keep repeating it to me in different ways through crazy shit coincidences. Showtime and game time are both phrases that spirits have used during Ouija sessions when they really get going and coming through strong. We don't need no tools to make you feel higher. Feel higher. No tools? What a peculiar phrase. I suspect this refers to the tools of masonry. each of which, as Albert Pike explained in the previously quoted passage, represents another dimension of visual space. The lyrics are saying that you don't need any accessories to see reality from a higher perspective. You just need a dimensional shift in your perception. Subete kono, naked body kara, fly out, fly out. This is an instruction to fly by night by projecting your naked astral body out from your physical body, presumably in order to see the higher dimensional perspective. We don't need no spotlight, 'cause we got the fire. Got the fire. This is the fire, the light that refracts out of the top of a cut diamond, which they are using as a spotlight from the deck prism diamonds in the ceiling in the song's video. I wonder if the 8-pointed asterisk on Cocteau's mural next to the DDD was meant to indicate the scintillation of fire on the top of a diamond when viewed from above. The back of John Dee's scrying mirror, kept in the British Museum, features a 7-pointed asterisk. When the show begins, I be the girl you've never met. This is a reference to the fact that I've never spoken face-to-face with the spirits I'm talking to. Mo dare ni mo tomidare nai. My time. Omogamama ni I just wanna dance. Dare ni mo jama we sasenai. I just do what I wanna do. I do what I wanna do. In other words, there is no law beyond do what thou wilt. Rise from diamond shigao hikari, no fusion crazy ni yarasete. Well, work it. Kane and the other prisoners want to rise from the diamond, the prism that imprisons them. No fusion refers to the fact that the sun is not, as is commonly claimed, operating through nuclear fusion. Also, fusion is a way of summoning monsters in the game Yu-Gi-Oh! Size WAXXX. No feeling. Hand sign WA core. We come in triple super high. Nah, 3 mix. I'm not sure of the exact significance, but another version of this song, released with the artist Soulhead, was titled XXX. Keep, dope, yippee, yippee, yay, yay. Deep, more. Yippee, yippee, yo. Yippee, yippee, yee, yay, yay, yippee, yay, yee, yo. X2. Go. Kumi, go. Go. Yippee, yippee, yee, yay. SOULHEAD, go. Yippee, yippee, yee, yo. Yippee, yippee, yee, yay, yay, yippee, yay, yee, yo. X2, we don't need no tools to make you feel higher. Feel higher. Subete kono, naked body kara, fly out. We don't need no spotlight, 'cause we got the fire. When the show begins, I be the girl you've never met, it's perfect temptation. Koromichi warui tekite no wa. Kitokimini deutame datandane. 1 + 2 be scandalous, 3 come together be endless. This is an invitation for heaven and earth, Gaia and Uranus, to come together once again and become an endless Mobius strip, canceling out time and space. Nobody can stopping this or step in this, 'cause we are girl with the guarantee mokirane, or be nara I know how yokobari, na girl nara tuzen no kotohoshi mono wa. Darigananto io utohoshi no. Yes, we want them all san byakorokuju do mosaiku nashi hadaka de 180 kairu brain of society bokashi nashi shikomi nashi face-to-face misetearu, real game to the bunch of gamer only. We got the key to the next stage. They, the spirits, have the secret key of Solomon to the higher dimension outside of the firmament, the highest heaven. Ichido kitara. Sure, you're gonna miss me. Nido mekara. WA. You'll be addicted. I be here, everybody say gimme samo. Shoga hajimatra, dare ni mo tomerare nail tomi anayan. No, I can't stop it. The dimensional shift being referred to here is the same one that is implied by the third hidden pillar on the Masonic tracing boards. When I thought about this in relationship to John Dee, it led me to some amazing realizations. In Yu-Gi-Oh!, Triple D refers to one demon who overpowers another by encompassing it from a higher dimension. That is exactly how the winner prevails in the holy game of Agio. Kane told us that you win the game by surrounding the Age on the second square. The Age being game tokens that somehow represent the transformative power of God. I think this implies the idea of prevailing against an enemy who has imprisoned you by escaping the prison and then building a larger prison around your enemy. In the case which I believe we are really talking about here, the game between God and the devil over control of existence, the goal of those in Tartarus is to get out of there into our world. Step 1. Then get out of this world into a larger world. Step 2. This is related to the mathematical problem of it being impossible to double a cube in three-dimensional space. But perhaps it is necessary to first build another structure around everything for them to reside in first. After all, the spirits have told us that there is nothing but death outside of the enclosure of the heavenly firmament. It is the abyss of chaos, both above and below us. The firmament is a bubble over earth that keeps us in this reality, outside of which nothing is real. So now let's think about Cocteau's 3 Ds, and the 3 Ds that King Bobogul implied with his speech DDD to John Dee, and talking about the first initial of his last name as a delta, a triangle. Could this also be related to the idea of the third dimension in contrast to the second dimension? After all, John Dee was one of the early people involved in trying to plot a map of the Earth, normally drawn on 2-dimensional paper at that time, onto a 3-dimensional sphere. Amazingly, the building that Notre Dame de France is housed in used to be the location of Robert Barker's famous panorama display house. The panoramas used optical illusions to create the effect of walking through different cities of the world in the third dimension. It was the talk of London at the time, at the start of the 19th century. It has also, since the 20th century, been situated just a few feet away from a strip of rare bookstores, including Watkins Books, which specializes in the occult. So while making his mural there, Cocteau most likely would have had easy access to both the history of the building's use for panoramas and the works of John Dee. Dee also experimented in optical illusions. My research into the panoramas at Leicester led me to revisit the work of James Egan. This author and researcher believes that John Dee built is the one who designed and commissioned a 16th century tower in Newport, Rhode Island, as a camera obscura, for the purpose of observing the sun, moon, and other heavenly bodies without having to stand in the cold outside to do it. In his numerous books on John Dee, Egan argues that Dee designed London's original Globe Theatre as well, famous for its association with Shakespeare, utilizing the secrets of squaring the circle. He shares many fascinating facts about the man, his activities, his interests, and his ideas that seem to fit right in with the concepts I've been covering here. Among them is the fact that Dee frequently encoded the name IOD into his works. It was a name for the deity, but also for himself, which brings to my mind a startling question. Did Dee actually equate himself with God in some way? I mentioned before my harebrained idea that just seemed ludicrous on the face of it, but if one believes in the power of ceremonial magic, should be theoretically possible. I suggested that John Dee and his fellow proto-Masonic friends might have somehow actually created the New World. Before it was discovered, all of the governments of Europe were actively funding expeditions to try to find an alternate route to China and India for trading purposes. Perhaps along the way, someone who knows about magic discovered a way to fold up the world so that you could theoretically just dig a hole to China and pop out the other side. I am imagining the operants working on a flat plane, encompassing only the countries included in the Masonic Lodge floor plans that are supposed to represent the world, as it was known in Solomon's time. In the process, they may deliberately altered history, the clues to which were discovered recently with the work of Anatoly Fomenko. I'm sure you've probably admitted the possibility that our reality could be a simulation, but you were assuming that we were talking about it being created by an advanced alien or future human civilization, right? You weren't thinking about 16th century men creating it through practicing magic. But just consider how Dee's Enochian tablets can be used to create representations of the physical world, which is actually one of the things the angels told him to do with them. They can also, like computers, be used to encode and store a great deal of information compactly. The explicit purpose of creating such models of the world for use in magic is to sympathetically change the world by changing the model you've built. The Enochian tablets, incredibly when put together, fold up into a hypercube. See the work on Vincent Bridges for more on this. Before he began channeling the Enochian system, Dee spent a good deal of time trying to understand a mysterious document called the Book of Soiga. Notice that Soiga is almost another phonetic anagram of Agio. Like the Enochian tablets, Soiga involves complicated tables of characters, which connect to form a 36 by 36 by 36 cube. 36, you'll recall, is the number of squares in the all-powerful second square of Agio, as Lon Milo Duquette says in his book Enochian Vision Magic. Like DNA, Alphanumeric squares carry an unimaginably vast amount of information in a deceptively small package. The magical process of the Book of Soiga, shuffling and distilling immense numbers of letters and squares into smaller and smaller bits of concentrated information, would become the modus operandi by which the spirits would ultimately communicate the secrets of Enochian magic to Dee and Kelly. In this way, the process is a metaphor of the mechanics of creation itself. As Carl Sagan said, "If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first create the universe." In this case, our apple pie is the manifest universe, the world as it presently exists. As Carl Sagan said, "If you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first create the universe." In this case, our apple pie is the manifest universe, the world as it presently exists, the world Dee and Kelly wish to understand and magically affect. This world is an end produce of a progression of cosmic events that physicists believe began with an immeasurably dense singularity, containing all the potential information that would eventually become the universe, that burst open and set into motion the phases of creation. The immensely packed assembly of 3636 by 36 alphanumeric squares found in the Book of Soiga is a crude but appropriate model for such a singularity. The intricate process of combining, shuffling, and distilling information-packed squares magically mimics the astronomical processes by which atoms and elements to stars and planets were formed in the creation cycle from seemingly chaotic units of a potential universe. This is exactly, without metaphor, what I think John Dee may have done, and why he felt entitled to refer to himself by the title IOD, something otherwise reserved for the creator deity. What, then, of the idea, communicated by Uranus on the Ouija board, that our world is at risk being folded up into smaller and smaller pieces until it almost disappears? I will just share here a few paranoid personal observations. About a week before the eclipse, my son, who is 4 years old, spontaneously announced to me that they were boxing up the planet and folding up the board like a board game. I don't know what he meant by they, and I've never talked to him about anything like this, so I took what he said as an omen. The Mithras and Uranus seance had already occurred, and I did think that this statement could somehow be related to the folding up effect that we had been warned about. It was only when I began writing this essay 2 weeks ago that I discovered what the word hod in English means. The first definition is a trough carried over the shoulder for transporting loads, as of bricks or mortar. The fourth definition is a rectangular basket, traditionally used by clammers to carry their catch. Clams and oysters are common symbols of the body as a repository of the soul, symbolized by the pearl inside. This may be connected to the functional purpose of the sun for those who control our world and harvest energy from our souls, since Mithras called the sun Aben Hod. Ever since the eclipse I witnessed 2 months ago, I've noticed something strange with the chemtrailing that I've grown so used to over my skies here in the Portland, Oregon metro area. Whereas they used to make a flat grid over the entire sky, the lines of which would blur together to form a sun-obscuring haze that would last throughout the day, now they are forming a concave curved dome net above the area. I noticed this one day about a month ago, when the sky was completely full of these lines. Some of them even formed obvious magical sigils, such as an inverted pentagram that point down to directly above the restaurant where I was eating. The lines were so bizarre and voluminous that I and 2 other local people spontaneously contacted each other to ask if we'd all seen it. Ever since then, the concave dome net has appeared over my head almost every day. The effect of this seems to be that the horizon drops off much closer than it used to. The sky looks like a small enclosed dome above me. The effect seems to be partially created by forming smaller curved lines inside of the smaller ones. It frankly looks very much like something that appears at the end of John Dee's Monus Hieroglyphica. The author's explanation of the meaning of this image is quite cryptic. He wrote, "Finally, we will insert other things in an opportune place which, if they are conveniently understood, will produce fruits most abundantly. We now abruptly conclude 24 possible permutations of the Pythagorean quaternary. The Pythagorean sum is 10. A complete addition of the parts yields 30. Take the same proportion which is shown in numbers when written in the natural order, after the first monad. Then from the first to the last make a continuous multiplication. That is to say, the first by the second, the product of these two by the third, and this product by the fourth, and so on until the last. The final product determines all the metatheses possible in respect of the proportion in space, and for the same reason in proportion to diverse objects as you wish. I tell thee, O king, this operation will be useful unto thee in many circumstances, whether in the study of nature or in the affairs of the government of men. For it is that which I am accustomed to use with the greatest of pleasure in the tzeruf or thamura of the Hebrews. I tell thee, O king, this of the artificial quaternary. A continuous multiplication yields 12. A simple addition yields 8. 1, 7, 4, 3. The sum of a complete addition of the parts is 24, number which is the same in any possible transposition of the quaternary, and which designates the physical purity and highest quality of gold, namely that of 24 carat when one has it, by itself, above ground. I know that many other powerful numbers may be produced out of our quaternary, by virtue of arithmetic and the power of numbers. Yet he who does not understand that a very great obscurity has by this method been illuminated by those numbers which I have drawn out, which have nature and distinction amongst such a multitude, will not be able to estimate their meaning, which is obscure and not to the point. Speaking of these diagrams, and another one which followed, being of the horizon eternitatis, the eternal horizon, D wrote, "It was because of the true effect of this that 4 illustrious men, friends of philosophy, were upon an occasion together in the great work. One day they were astonished by a great miracle in this thing, and forthwith dedicated themselves from that day forward to sing praises to God and to preach the thrice mighty, because he had given them so much wisdom and power, and so great an empire over all other creatures." To me this sounds like D describing how he and a group of friends did the magical act of New World creation that I'm suggesting might have happened. The other thing I have noticed since the eclipse is that the sun looks way more white rather than yellow to me than it was before. I cited the claim earlier that the sun puts out pure white light at midday. I certainly haven't noticed that before. But as for the rest of the day, it seems to me that the sun is a bit bigger, a bit brighter, and a lot whiter than it was before. In fact, I almost never see even a hint of yellow in it anymore. Yet despite being brighter, it is not as hard to look at as it was before. Indeed, I have to keep myself from staring at it, because looking does not seem to hurt my eyes at all now. So I sat up straight in my chair when I was going through my Waite Rider tarot deck, and noticed that the fool is shown walking over a cliff with a perfectly white sun shining behind him, with a yellow sky in the background. I looked, and while the sun is seen in several of the other cards, it is only on the fool that it is depicted as white. Of course, the fool is shown being as oblivious to this as to everything else around him. Is this a metaphor for us, and the fact that we never bother to look up to really see the sun? The increased brightness of the sun brought to mind a cryptic phrase used in the chemical wedding of Christian Rosenkreutz, where John Dee's monad symbol is reproduced. In the story, all of the alchemists called to work on the chemical wedding are given a golden fleece with a medal hanging from it, decorated with a symbol of the sun and the moon in opposition. Underneath this, it says on the medal, "The light of the moon shall be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun shall be 7 times lighter than at present." It seems as if the magicians who are control of the horizon today are proceeding with John Dee's plan. I do wonder where it will lead us. End notes. This is splendor in Sanskrit. I wonder if this could possibly be related to the Hidbiru, Apiru, or Hapiri, words used by ancient cultures like Egypt, Sumer, and Akkad to denote the Hebrew people. I also wonder if this name is related to the Greek name for the Titan god Hyperion, father of the sun god Helios. According to Baldwin's Prehistoric Nations, the sons of Uranos helped him administrate a kingdom in the Mediterranean and the Atlantic Ocean. Their names were Kronos, Atlas, and Hyperion. The latter was the eldest and heir to the throne. He succeeded his father, but then was ousted by his brothers, just like the story Cain told me on the Ouija board about the fall of Atlantis. Hyperion might also be Abraham. Ignatius Donnelly reports that according to the Phoenicians, Cronos circumcised himself and forced all his subjects to do the same, then sacrificed his son to Oranos. This matches up with Abraham's biography. He had himself, his 13-year-old son, Ishmael, and all of his subjects circumcised. Then he left that child for dead in the desert as a scapegoat, and later tried to sacrifice his other son, Isaac, to his god. Macrobius wrote that Capricorn was the gate of men, allowing passage for human souls from earth to the upper realms. Cancer, meanwhile, was said to be the gate of the gods. There is further discussion on this later on in the essay. In Latin, eripe is the second-person singular present active imperative of eripo, which means to creep out or over something. Other related words like ereptio, a taking by force, and ereptor, one who takes away by force, a robber, imply the same as the original meaning of rape, which is kidnapping or forcibly removing something or someone. Thus the term rapture is used for the end times event where people are to be taken away, and the grim reaper for the angel of death, who takes away all souls at their appointed time. I think the term was used by the Spirit to imply the soul slipping out of its enclosure or prison, not only the prison of the body, but also by the firmament covering the earth plane. The word Ar in Sumerian meant box or enclosure, and most specifically implied a prison. As L.A. Waddell has shown, the original Sumerian pictograph for this word, prior to the development of cuneiform, was an inverted pentagram, which also meant plow. I believe that this is connected to the ancient ritual magic practice of using pentagrams to imprison conjured spirits. The idea being that the connected, never-ending angles make escape impossible. I also think there is a connection with the underground imprisonment of Cronos, remembered as the ancient inventor of agriculture and prayed to for harvest success as the patron of it. When one plowed into the ground, it meant digging into the region where Cronos, who invented the plow, was being kept against his will, but was still thought to be exerting power over crops and giving telepathic advice to farmers even as he slept. The connection between the syllable ar or and the idea of an enclosure or prison to escape from which one must slip out, sneak out, or creep out is also found in Latin. Thus we have the word ergastulum, which means a workhouse for debtors or slaves. Etymologyonline.com claims that the origin of Tartarus is unknown, but I think we have a clue here. Thus, considering the foregoing, it seems logical to seek a connection between the Spirit's use of the word erepe and the Sator Rotus Latin square from the second pentacle of Saturn in the Key of Solomon. This palindrome is written across a 5x5 grid, Sator arepo tenet opera rotus. Quite coincidentally, I chose to use it in my genuflex story, at the scene of a ritual murder where a man was decapitated and hung from the ceiling, bent backwards in the position of the Zodiac Man. I also chose to give him the first name Cum, not realizing at the time that this name actually means cosmos. The meaning of the message in the magic square is open for debate. Sator means sewer, in Latin, a term for Saturn. Arepo is a word for which no one is certain of the meaning, or even if it is supposed to have a meaning. I think it might be a term denoting that Saturn the sewer is the prisoner in an enclosure, an AR. A tenant in Latin is something that is held, which is why tenant in English is a person who occupies a particular space. Opera is Latin for work, and rotus means wheels. So this magic square has often been translated, Arepo, the plowman, works the wheel, turning the barbarous word arepo into a proper name just for lack of anything better to do with it in order to make the sentence intelligible. But I think it may be more related to the idea of an ergastulum, where Saturn is imprisoned and forced to work doing something that keeps the wheels of the heavens turning and the crops growing. Perhaps just the ACCT of dreaming accomplishes this. He may have been on his way to listing off all the letters in the Zeta Rota square. The word Rienpo contains 6 of the 8 unique letters in the square. The word EREPE, mentioned earlier, might be related also, as well as the Latin repono, meaning to bend back or to lay up in store, like the Zodiac Man bent backwards and hung by his feet and hands. It also resembles the description in the song American the beautiful of the continental United States, spanning from sea to shining sea. As the polar mountain was thought by the ancients to be the pillar holding up heaven, we are now told that there is a pole centered there that provides Earth's magnetic field, without which many catastrophic things would happen, including the loss of our atmosphere, the slipping of Earth's crust, and the changing of Earth's orientation in regards to the stars, all of which are analogous to the sky falling from our perspective. So what does it signify that, on the Ouija board that Brian Albert designed, there is a fleur-de-lis placed on both the upper right and upper left corners of the board, right over the places where the openings above the pillars are found? Does that mean that the tops of both pillars are somehow in the north, and that the windows of heaven are to be found along the way? Also, what does it mean that the fleur-de-lis is on all four corners of the chess/agio board in the lower right corner of our Ouija board, which is itself, I believe, representative of the physical plane of existence? According to Blavatsky, astronomically, the Atlantides have become the seven Pleiades. Punctuation in original. Philip K. Dick reported that the information he downloaded from the transcosmic entity that contacted him mentally came in the form of a ray pink of light that emerged from elsewhere and hit him in the brain. This same concept might be symbolized in the Thoth deck also, wherein the Fool is depicted with only his head on the inside of the rainbow hose coming from his heart, with the rest of his body on the outside. Thus he has his, quote, head in the clouds, over the rainbow, like many of the mystically minded people whom society calls fools because they spend too much time thinking about the mysteries of existence. The connection between the Fool card in Crowley's Thoth deck and figure of Uranus as the bent backwards zodiac man is made explicit when you see how the latter is depicted in Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages. There he is shown in a sphere floating halfway between the firmament of heaven and the realm above, directly beneath the divine throne, situated between the feet of a Jupiter-like depiction of God, indicated by the emergence of Minerva or Mete from his forehead. Notice that the zodiac man's arms, legs, and head, twisted back behind him, are upside down, hanging down beneath the firmament, while his torso alone is inside the upper realm, pointed up at the throne. Now note that on the Fool card in the Thoth deck, we see the figure with his hands and feet curled out and around the rainbow, while his head is inside of it. XIV editorial advice. The best thing you can hope for, if you find yourself anywhere on these hell paths, is to be able to scamper back home to Malkuth, where there's Wi-Fi, food, and a hot shower, and you know you're alive, or at least you have the feeling of it. These angelic informants actually dictated to him all the correspondences between the Enochian tablets, all of the 91 parts of the earth named by man. These included many that Dee and Kelly had never heard of. This was not the first time angels had communicated such information to people, for Kelly recorded that the spirit Nalvage told them, "Notwithstanding the angel of the Lord appeared unto Ptolemy, and opened unto him the parts of the earth. But some he was commanded to keep secret, and those are northward under your pole. But unto Yon the very true names of the world in her creation are delivered."